Hello and welcome to our training video on analyzing NWEA data from fall to winter. This session will guide you in understanding student growth, interpreting key reports, and planning instruction based on data insights. I wanted to take a minute to review the 2024-2025 diocesan NWEA data goal. This is a stretch goal where we are looking for students to demonstrate achievement at or above the 65th percentile. The 65th percentile was chosen because that signifies students as being college and career ready. Please keep in mind that the 50th percentile is normal and typical achievement for students in any grade level. We've moved away from a specific growth goal and really focused this year on students' individual growth goals as determined by the NWEA system based on historical data for your specific students. We are looking for students to meet or exceed their individual growth goal for each of the 3 assessment benchmarks in reading and math. Please keep in mind that students who meet their individual growth goals will not see much movement in their achievement percentile. If students can achieve above their expected individual growth goal, you will see a lot of growth and movement in the achievement section of the data reports for that specific student. First, we're going to look at a whole class option. I know many teachers are familiar with looking at achievement data, but may not be so familiar with looking at individual student growth data. So the first report we're going to focus on is something that you can look at data for your whole class, and that is the Achievement Status and Growth Summary with Quadrant Report. This will really help you in tracking individual student data points between fall and winter, and also allowing you to look at individual growth goals and see patterns in how to adjust instruction to support continued student development. It also helps to consider how this data informs both whole class and individual instruction for you as the teacher. So if you log into NWEA Map Growth and you go to Map Reports and you go to Other Reports, you will see a list of every data report that is available in NWEA. To get to this specific report, you're going to click on the Achievement Status and Growth Summary with Quadrant Report. When you select the data and you bring up the report, the first thing you will see is what you're seeing now on your screen, the Quadrant Report. This will give you the ability to toggle on or off various test subjects using the checkboxes, gender of students, ethnicity, and it will allow you to see students who are high achieving high growth, which is that top right green color, low achievement high growth, which is that orange color in the top left of the chart, high achievement low growth, which is the bottom right yellow color, and low achievement low growth, which is the bottom left pink color. Please keep in mind that this report will always default to the conditional growth percentile and achievement percentiles at the 50th percentile. You may see on your screen, I have adjusted the achievement percentile to show our diocesan-wide goal of the 65th percentile. If you click on individual icons on the screen, first of all, I would recommend only looking at one content area at a time. You will see some basic information about the student. For example, we have Marcella Freeman. It's showing me the test that she took. It's showing the achievement percentile, the growth percentile, and the projected and observed growth of that student. We're going to look into what that data and those specific numbers mean in the next slide. If you were to keep scrolling down past the quadrant report, you will see a roster of students. It helps visualize class-wide trends in this roster view, and it categorizes students based on achievement and growth allowing teachers to tailor support, look for patterns. For example, who is exceeding expectations, who is meeting expectations, and who needs some targeted intervention to meet their goals. Please keep in mind, on the left-hand side of the screen, you will see some colored dots, or squares, I guess I should say. Keep in mind that these are not linked to the achievement percentile bands, so those colors of blue, green, yellow, pink. These colors are linked to the quadrant chart above. So that lists what quadrant they're in. Are they high achieving high growth, low achieving high growth, low achieving low growth, etc. You will see the grade level of the students listed. You will see when they took their test. It will always default to the most recent testing window for this date. So in this case, it is winter of 2025. So as we can see, all of the students in grade 7 for this particular class took their math assessment on January 14th. You will also see some achievement data, which will compare, in this case, fall to winter. You could also compare fall to spring, if it were that time of the year. But at the making of this video, we are only in the winter data reporting session. So you'll be able to compare RIT scores from fall to winter. So in this first student, you can see they got a 227. So we're looking at that bold number in this 3 RIT score range. So they received a 227 in the fall and a 229 in the winter. So they went up 2 RIT points between fall and winter. You may be asking yourself why there are 3 numbers listed for both the RIT score range and the achievement percentile ranges. The bold number in both of these categories indicates where the student has tested for that specific benchmark. The numbers to the left of the bold number for both the RIT score range and achievement percentile range, and to the right of the bold number for both columns, is called the standard error or standard deviation. So what that means, if we're looking again at this fall 24 RIT range, the bold number, the student scored a 227. However, if I were to test them again as their teacher in the same testing window with the same content at the same time, they're projected to score anywhere in this range of a 224 to a 230. Same thing for winter. So the system kind of gives you a projection. If you test them over, everything being equal, that's where the range that they would score in for their RIT score. Now again, as the classroom teacher, you have insights well beyond the 3 data points of NWEA, and you may disagree with where the system is deciding that RIT range would fall. So please don't solely use that as the basis for retesting if you feel a student needs to take a test over again. Same thing for the achievement percentile. So you can see in the fall for this first student, they were at the 66th percentile for achievement, and they bumped down to the 63rd percentile in achievement. You may look at this and say, well, they got a 227 for the fall and a 229 for the winter, so they went up a few points. So how did their achievement percentile decrease and go from a 66th percentile to the 63rd? Well, we're going to go over here and look at column B, C, and D to gain a little more insight. So you can see here, column B, C, and D will always be for the most recent testing term. So in this case, winter 25. So you will see that the student in column B there was projected to get a 230. They only got a 229. So they missed that projected RIT goal by 1 point. Which means if you go all the way over to column D, they also did not meet their projected growth. And we can look at that by looking at column C, so the projected and observed growth. So they were projected to grow 3 RIT points. So from a 227 in the fall, they were projected to grow to a 230. So that would be 3 RIT points. However, they only grew 2 RIT points. So they were projected to grow 3 RIT points. They only grew 2. So they missed that RIT goal by 1 point, which is reflective in column D of the -1 for the growth index. So therefore, they did not meet their growth goal. If we look at the next student in the list, they had a 221 for the RIT score in the fall and a 231 for their RIT score in the winter. They were projected to have a RIT score of 224 and grow by 3 points. So they were projected to go from a 221 to a 224. And that would be an increase of 3 RIT points. However, if we look at the winter data in column A, we will see they actually scored a 231 for their RIT score in the winter. So they went from a 221 to a 231, and actually instead of just the 3 points they were projected to grow, they grew 10 points. And you will see there they have a healthy increase from the 53rd achievement percentile to the 67th. So that's why I say it's important for students to meet and exceed their growth goal, because you will really see that achievement percentile increase if you can help the students achieve above their goal. So if we look in column D, we can see that they surpassed their growth goal by 7 RIT points and therefore met their projected growth. So this is a nice way to view individual student data while looking at the whole class roster. Keep in mind, you can also manipulate any of these blue highlighted areas. So you can organize the students by quadrant. You can organize them by RIT range. You can organize them by percentile, achievement percentile range, or RIT score from highest to lowest, lowest to highest, and so on. The next report we're going to discuss is the Class Profile report. So again, if you're in the list of NWEA reports and you click on Class Profile and you select your class, you will see 3 tabs at the top. You will see one with assessment data. You will see one that is instructional area by student. And that's what we're going to focus on, the tab that's called instructional area by student. This gives you some insightful data that goes above and beyond just the single content area RIT score. It shows insight in how students perform across different instructional areas of an assessment. For example, for the math assessment, students get a separate RIT score for geometry, operations and algebraic thinking, statistics and probability, and real and complex number systems. Conversely, for reading, students get a separate RIT score for reading informational text, reading literature, and vocabulary acquisition and use. Identifying strengths and areas for improvement allows for more targeted instruction, and the data in this report can be useful for planning differentiated lessons, grouping students effectively, and creating small group instruction that will help you move the needle for achievement and growth. So if we look at this fictitious school report, you will see that the students are in 4th and 5th grade, so maybe a multi-grade level classroom put together. It's going to give you that overall RIT score, like we see in so many reports. It's going to show you the achievement percentile for students. But then it's going to give you a RIT score broken down by these subdomains in math. So for example, a lot of times I know teachers are saying, hey, my students are in the blue achievement percentile, they're high achieving, they're low growth. How do I get them to grow? They achieve just fine, they're struggling to meet or exceed those growth goals. Well, if we look at Doris Washington here, she's in 4th grade. She got a 223 for her RIT score in math, and she's at the 87th percentile. Now, just based on these few data points, it's easy to look at Doris and say, wow, this kid's really high achieving. I don't need to spend a whole lot of time with her. However, if you're looking to see where her strengths and weaknesses are, in looking at this class profile report, if we look at these RIT scores by subdomain, she got a 220 for geometry, a 222 for operations and algebraic thinking, a 230 for statistics and probability, and a 220 for real and complex number systems. So even though she got a 223 overall, I can see her two weakest areas are geometry and real and complex number systems. She has a great strength at a 230 for stats and probability. So it's just an additional data point that will give you an idea of maybe where those high achieving, low growth students are needing some additional support. Same information can be found for math, or for reading, science, and language usage. If you continue to scroll down in the class profile report, you will see students grouped by 10-point RIT bands. This is also by instructional area, so there is a drop-down bar that you can select any of those subcategories for the assessments. So in this case, we're looking at geometry. You can see that the 10-point RIT bands are listed and where the students rank in those 10-point RIT bands. This can be used to help you group students initially for differentiated instruction or small group activities. It can also be very helpful in looking at your standard deviation. So where are students at in this class as a whole? The smaller together the groupings of students are, that indicates that students are all pretty much on the same pace with the content that's being taught. If you have students spread more widely apart, so if we had additional groups of students, that's going to demonstrate as the classroom teacher that you have a group of students that are coming in from all different levels. Some are very low, some very high, some in the middle, and that there'll be a greater need to differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all those students. If you were to click on any of the highlighted blue student names, that will take you directly to their student profile report. And this will give you the opportunity for the NWEA data system to really indicate those strengths and areas of growth for students and give you some more specific information by individual student data. You may be thinking to yourself, what do I do with these 10-point RIT bands? What does it mean? Well, you will see that there is a link to a report called the Learning Continuum. This is going to be where you can find standards and educational statements based on these 10-point RIT ranges. Please keep in mind that content within the 10-point RIT band, where these student scores, is content that they are ready to learn at this point in time. The NWEA assessment looks to find the student's zone of proximal development, or ZPD. And how it does that is it zones in on where the students are answering questions for specific content 50% of the time correctly and 50% of the time incorrectly. So just because it's content that is within the 10-point RIT band where the student scored does not mean it is content and material that has been mastered by the student. So if I were to click on, these are all things I talked about. I forgot to click next. If I were to click on the Learning Continuum, you will see at the top that you can select a test. It's going to default to the test of the report you're looking at and default to the grade level of the students you are looking at that specific point in time. But you can go back and change these to be a different assessment and a different grade level. You can look at content grouped by standard or by topic. In this case, we are looking at items grouped by standard. The 10-point RIT bands you see in purple will match the 10-point RIT bands on that class profile report. And then you can click on any of the links to go to the specific subtopics. In this case, we're looking at numbers and operation. So if I have students in the 211 to 220 RIT range, These are things they're ready to learn. So they're ready to learn how to use place value concepts to represent amounts of tens and ones and to compare three-digit numbers. If we're looking to scaffold for students and create areas where maybe they're excelling based on those subtopic RIT bands, we may want to look at the RIT band range to the right to maybe increase the rigor for students in certain areas. We may also want to look at the RIT band to the left to maybe decrease the rigor if we have students that are struggling with specific standards or content topics. So the Learning Continuum does a great job connecting assessment results with specific skills that students are ready to learn and develop. It helps in setting instructional priorities and scaffolding learning appropriately to increase or decrease the rigor as needed. It's a valuable tool for aligning classroom instruction with student needs. So we've talked a lot about planning for individualized learning or differentiation. So the graphic here kind of puts the percentile bands into a different way of thinking. So the first graphic, we have our percentile bands. So red for low, anything below the 21st percentile. Orange for low average, anything in the 21st to the 40th percentile. Average is that yellow color, so the 41st through the 60th percentile. High average is the 61st to the 80th percentile, and high is the blue color, and anything at or above the 80th percent, or anything above the 80th percentile, excuse me. A great way to look at it is the graphic below. So we have the same colored percentile bands, and really how you can think about the data and what you need to do for the specific student. So the red, first through the 20th percentile, up into the first quarter of the low average percentile, those students need some remediation. So those students are missing the mark or missing valuable content that they need to be able to succeed in the current grade level. From the quarter of the low average percentile band to about the quarter of the average percentile band, that's going to be where students need some scaffolding put in place for them. So they're meeting the mark for the most part, but there are scaffolding that needs to be put in place to maybe spiral some of the content topics that they're struggling with, or maybe they need some support in honing in those skills for the new content material. Maybe they haven't mastered it and the class has moved on to something else, or whatever the case is. So the middle of the average range, those are the standard students who are making progress, they're meeting grade level expectations. So you can start to look to challenge those students. So about the last quarter of the average percentile through most of the high average percentile. Those students need challenge. Those students get the grade level concepts, so they're ready to maybe create some more complex work around topics you've already covered and maybe increasing the rigor. And by challenging, we don't mean, give them 30 more problems of the same information everybody else is doing. So really challenging them to increase that rigor level, to challenge their thinking and help them along as they work to exceed their growth goals for the NWEA assessment. And then you have students to about the last quarter of the high average percentile through the blue high percentile range. These students really need some enrichment. So these students are well beyond the grade level topics that are being covered. And so depending on the resources in your school or your system, perhaps they could be looked at for maybe an advanced math program or the high school programs that students can take in middle school, things like that. So I hope that helps you maybe think about it in a little bit of a different light. It can really help to use data strategically to maximize learning for all of your students. I also want to mention that in the class profile report with your list of students, you can sort students by alphabetical order You can sort students, as you can see I have on the screen there, by achievement percentile. So in this case, I have it sorted lowest to highest. You can do highest to lowest. You can also sort it by RIT range, Lexile level, things of that nature. So that can also be helpful when you're looking at maybe pairing students or grouping students, or maybe creating a differentiated lesson plan to meet the needs of students on a specific content that you're teaching. And it's really helpful to plan instruction to meet the needs of each student. So here we have just a generic content standard for math. So telling and writing time to the nearest minute and measuring time in intervals of minutes. Also solving word problems involving addition and subtraction of time intervals in minutes. So this is where you can kind of list how many students, or if you're planning for instruction, maybe you're putting names instead of just the number of students, but really grouping them by the students that need remediation, scaffolding, those students that are meeting grade level expectations, and those that need challenged and enriched. And here you just have, I have a basic example of what it looks like to remediate, scaffold, challenge, enrich, and so on. So something to consider as you're planning, maybe to look at it in this type of format would be helpful. So after sorting students, you can create a plan for each group if you're doing small group instruction, or each individual student, if your time and instruction allows. Using data-driven instruction can address gaps and reinforce strengths of students to help them grow and achieve as they continue on their educational journey. And leveraging resources from NWEA to guide lesson planning and interventions. And that's where the data comes in. So using those 3 data points along with the assessment data you've collected as a classroom teacher to really make those instructional decisions that are going to meet the needs of students, challenge them, and increase the rigor or remediation as needed. So some final thoughts. NWEA can be a powerful tool to drive student achievement. It's important to regularly review and adjust instruction based on not only NWEA, but also your classroom formative assessments. It's important to remember to use the provided reports to create meaningful learning experiences that are differentiated to meet the needs of your students. But again, keep in mind that this is only 3 data points for the school year, and it should be used in conjunction with your classroom level student data. If you are seeing discrepancies between your classroom student data and the NWEA results, it's important to do a deep dive with the student data and the assessments for your classroom and NWEA to see where the gaps are, where the student is demonstrating strengths, and where the areas of growth are to help support the student. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. God bless.